Hello and welcome ProITians. So till now we have learned quite a few things, right? We have done almost like 60% of the basics of Azure, right? Now let's see how we can actually control the Azure resources, and then we should also look at the options that we can use to bulk add the virtual machines or resources on Azure, right? So what is the technology that we can use? Okay, so this session is going to be divided into multiple parts, but it is going to be on a single session. Okay, and to start with, what we are going to start with is for the Azure Resource Manager, right? So this is the thing which you are going to use to manage your resources or bulk adding your resources, bulk configuration of your resources, right? So we can utilize that using some Azure Resource Manager templates. Okay, so those are basically JSON files. We are going to have a look at one of the JSON file and see how the template looks like. Okay, and then what we are going to do is we are going to move ahead with the other features of Azure with regards to resource management, that is Azure policies. We have to look at how we can control, what are the features that we can use to control, what are the various options we have to control the resources in Azure with Azure policies. Okay, and then we are going to move on and we are going to look at Azure logs. Okay, so those are there are actually basically two logs. Either one is to avoid deletion, and the another one is to have a read-only access. Okay, so those are the things that we're going to look at, and then we will be covering quite all these sort of features in this session. Okay, great. Okay, to start with, let's start with the Azure Resource Manager. So what is Azure Resource Manager, right? I mean, you have various things in Azure, right? I mean, I'm just talking about the Azure resource concepts. So you have various resources in Azure, right? And then you have, I mean, at the root level, you have your Azure management, and then you have the various subscriptions. You can have multiple subscriptions, and then at the lower level, you will have resource groups, and then you'll have the various resources, right? So those are the things, right? And yeah, so we are going to start with that, and then we will move to the next one. All right, great. I'll see you in the session then. Hello and welcome to ITians. So in this session, we are going to look at the ARM templates. Um, let's start with the ARM templates, right? So Azure Resource Manager and Azure Resource Manager templates, right? Let's begin with what is Azure Resource Manager. Okay, so Azure Resource Manager is the deployment and management service for Azure. So it's a management layer that enables you to create, update, and delete a resource in Azure. Okay, so here is the pictorial overview of how it works actually. So you will have a central configuration where all the requests will land into, that is called as Azure Resource Manager. So it can come from various options like Azure Portal, Azure PowerShell, Azure CLI, APIs, or SDK. Okay, so that request will be invoked by a user, or it can be done automatically using JSON scripts. We're going to touch base on a few of those things in the coming session, right? But in the meantime, just to have a note of it that these are the options that we can trigger the request. And so once the request is reaching to Azure Resource Manager, it actually first thing it will do is it will check if that request is coming from a valid user ID, I mean whether it's a valid request or not, or it's a, I mean, a general request or not. So that sort of authentication is done at this layer.
and then it's going to do a perform a various other checks such as policies and logs, which we are going to touch base in the coming sessions. But yeah, I mean, it's going to do all those checks and confirm if that authorization is there to this user or not. Once those two checks are done, then that resource will be provisioned. Yeah. So again, I mean, user invokes the request using any of those methods. It comes to Azure Resource Manager. Azure Resource Manager does the authentication and authorization, and then it can provision those resources. Right. Great. So let's touch base on what are the key terminologies that are used in Azure. Okay, first one is about the resources, right? Yeah, so everything in Azure is a resource. Yeah, so I mean, it could include the services that are part of, such as like virtual machines, storage accounts, VNets, databases, etc. I mean, so all those are resources. Yeah, then is the resource group. Now, resource groups are like container that contain multiple resources that are related to each other, right? It is not dependent on the location. You can have a resource group on a particular location, and you can have resources from other locations. It doesn't actually. It is there's no such restrictions that you should have resources in the same resource group where the resource group is located. It's not that. I mean, for example, you can have a resource group in East US, whereas you can have the resources located in Europe. So it's just more of a container. It's more for the logical or administrative boundary for a resource. Yeah. Now, the third concept is resource provider. So it consists of a family of related Azure resources, for example, virtual machines and virtual machine scale sets. Yeah. Then the fourth one is about the resource manager template. So it's actually a JSON file. I mean, we are going to look at one of the template, a very short template of the JSON file in the coming slides. But JSON file actually defines the resource and the configurations that are required to be for the resource to be deployed. Yeah, great. So here is the ARM template. I mean, so you can see, I mean, it starts with resource, and then what is the type? Type is the Microsoft storage account, and then it is this one is the API version, and the name, this will be the name of the resource. Yeah, so it's going to be my storage account. Yeah, this is the name for that resource, and since we're creating the storage account here in this particular JSON template, so it's going to be the name of my storage account will be the name of the storage account, and then this will be the location. So here in this template we are using West US, that is the location, and then the SKU. So it's going to be using the particular SKU, and since we're using the storage account here, so this will be SKU related to storage, and then it will be utilizing standard LRS. LRS is local redundant storage. Yeah. So SKU getting used here for storage account is LRS, and then the kind is storage, and that's all. So what happens when you when you kickstart this template or this particular JSON file? So it storage account with the name my storage account in the region West US with standard local redundant storage is created. Yeah, so it can happen automated. Yeah, yeah. So let's talk about the key benefits. So how I mean how the ARM templates helps us. So ARM template manages the infrastructure through templates that is actually a JSON file that includes the properties for the infrastructure to deploy. Yeah, the deployments can be automated through infrastructure as code. Now, what is infrastructure as code? Okay, so this is a concept where you can actually utilize for deploying the resources with a template in Azure. In the case of Azure, it is through JSON file, and that's how we can actually deploy the resources. But there's one thing which we have to make sure when we are utilizing this. we should be actually following the correct order. I mean, for example, I mean, we will have the management layer where our resource manager sits in, and then below that it will be subscription. So when you're going to use the infrastructure as a code, you have to give the option which particular subscription you will be utilizing it, and below that you'll have to provide the resource group, the locations, and then the size or the SKUs. So all those things should come in a particular order. Otherwise, it will fail. So that's what I mean. That's what the concept of an infrastructure as code is. So it helps in automation through the infrastructure as a code. Yeah. So you can centrally deploy, manage, and monitor all your resources. Yeah, you can apply tags to resources to logically organize them, not only to organize them, but also to raise the bills and costs for at the organization level. Yeah. So as per the tax, I mean, you can create the billings, and that accordingly the bills can be charged to the particular department. All right. Okay, so here is the like the hierarchy information which we can use for infrastructure as a code. Here is the management group and your, I mean, Azure Resource Manager actually sits here, and then it will utilize the subscriptions. You can have multiple subscriptions, though we are utilizing only the free subscription, free tier subscription for now. Yeah, but you can have multiple subscriptions here. Yeah. Uh, then you have those various resource groups. It could be spread across any of the location, and within that resource group can have various resources like storage accounts or databases and yeah, virtual machine skill sets. Yeah.
So we have looked about Azure's Resource Manager. We have looked about the template, and as you might have seen, it's a very simple template. I mean, it's a very basic thing that you can utilize for bulk modification or addition of your virtual machine or any resource in Azure, right? Great. Now let's move to the next topic, that will be Azure resource groups, right? So what are resource groups? Why do we need resource groups? Well, resource group, you can consider them as your logical or administrative group of resources. Okay, you don't have to worry about the placing a resource group to a particular location. Well, you can place a resource group to one location, and you can have resources from all the locations, right? So it's basically a logical or administrative group for the resources. I mean, it's just like a container. Okay, so let's have a look on the session and see what is resource group, right? Great.
Okay, so let's start with our discussion on Azure Resource Group, right? So let's start with a short overview, and then we will have a look on the portal. Yeah? Okay, so resource groups. So resource groups are logical containers for resources deployed on Azure. Yeah? So all deployed resources, I mean, that is any of the Azure services, are part of a single resource group. And I mean, you have to have a particular resource group. Any of the resource has to be part of a resource group. But it can't happen that a particular resource group, or sorry, a particular resource. I mean, a resource can only be part of a single resource group. You can't have a resource part of multiple resource group, right? Now you can do one thing. I mean, later on, if you decide, I mean, if you realize that a particular resource is sitting in the wrong resource group, you can move a resource to a different resource group. So that is possible, right? So resources in a resource group can be deployed in a different Azure region. So there is no, I mean, correlation as such of the location of the resource group and the location of a resource. So you can have a resource group in one particular location where you can have resources in a different location. So there is not such a correlation exists. It's just as a container. Your resource group is just as a container. Yeah. So resource groups are used to better manage and organize resources in Azure. Okay, so that's how we can. I mean, that's what I mean by saying when that resource groups are more of a logical or administrative boundary of a resource. Yeah, so you can apply various configurations, various policies, billing purpose you can utilize. Now let's talk about the resource group location. Okay, so resource group location. Actually, resources in RG can be part of any region, but as I mentioned earlier, RGs are tied to a specific region. Yeah, okay. And location is part of a metadata for RGs. Yeah, so I mean it's just part of the metadata. You don't have to. So the question might come that why do we need to? Since we don't have to, we can have the resources in a different resource, different location or region. Why do we need to have a region configured for a resource group? Well, actually, it's only for the metadata. I mean, that is mainly for I mean, just for your logical unit configuration, container configuration for a resource. Okay, great. So let's look at the RG naming conventions. So it has to have a consistent naming conventions for resource groups. Basically, you can have it as per your requirement. Every organization there is, I mean, every organization will have their own requirements. You have to stick to one particular naming convention. It's, I mean, it's a best standard basis. Stick to one, follow it all along. Yeah. And the types of resources in the container, I mean, you can use your naming convention based on that. You can use it for the type of resources itself. So example can be like project web hyphen database VMs hyphen RG. So that is, I mean, that will actually give you a correlation, okay, that this particular resource group will have database virtual machines for a project web project. Yeah. So it will consist only for it will consist virtual machines only for databases. Yeah. So another option is like resource subscription type region, VNet DB West US. Yeah. So these are just the parameters for that you can use. And if you want, you can go through this link where you can find the more naming conventions that I used. Yeah. So let's talk about the principles in organizing resource groups. We can organize resources in many ways by region. I mean, it could be like East US, Asia, Europe, whatever. I mean, so it depends on your region. It can depend on your department, like RGIT for your IT department, RG marketing for your marketing, HR for your HR department. So it will give you a logical boundary for the resources you can actually make through. I mean that okay, the resources in this particular resource group is part of your IT organization or marketing or an HR organization. By environment, it could be for production, prod, DevOps, or testing, right? By resource type, it could be like for is the resource group for storage accounts or for VNets or for virtual machines. I mean, yeah, so it can actually you can have based on your resource type. Even by admin type, like RG owner, RG contributor, RG reader, RG XYZ. So it could be based on your admin type also. And of course, by life cycle, it could be for, I mean, for example, I mean, this particular resources will be only for project one, and the other resource group is only for resources part of project two. So, for example, if the project one is over, you have the two options either to delete all the resources which are part of RG hyphen project one, or if you want some of your virtual machines to be present, you can move them to a different resource group, or you can create a new resource group like RG hyphen prod1, and you can move the required virtual machines to rg-prod1. Yeah, and then you can go ahead and delete the resources, and then later on the resource group rg-project1. I mean, just a note here. If you delete a resource group, that doesn't mean you can delete a resource. Yeah, I mean, the resource will still be there. The best way to do it is, first you have to delete all the resources, then you should delete a resource group. Okay. Now, again, I mean, this can actually help in preparing the billing purpose, because if you're going to organize the resources based on your department or based on the life cycle, so that accordingly you can actually bill based on your resource groups. Yeah, and then for the design consideration, the suggestion is you have to define a clear, straightforward structure that would be optimum for your requirement. It could happen that, okay, one particular situation best suits your requirement I mean, but it might not suit for a different organization. So it's just a framework. It's not, I mean, a solution as such that you should be using. These are all part of your best practice. Okay, this is something which it's better you, I mean, cultivate this habit when you're going to design bigger solutions, right?
Great. So we have seen what is resource group, right? Now let's go to the Azure portal and see how it actually looks like. What are the things are there in the resource group, right? Great. Let's go ahead.
Okay, so here I am on the portal, and this is my homepage. So I can go here for the resource groups, or what I can do is I can actually type here uh, resource groups. Yeah. Anyways, it actually leads me to the same place. Yeah, resource groups, right? Now, as you can see, I have already have three resource groups here. One is the network watcher, RG. Uh, that is one which we actually, I mean, that is the one which actually gets created by default as soon as you configure your subscription and start using it. Yeah, and then these are the two which I have actually manually created. Now, if I go in this one, you can see the location is East US, and then another one is Australia East. Yeah, so I can actually have uh, multiple resource groups spread across multiple locations, right? Now, let me go to this particular resource group. Yeah. So if I click on that, I'll see the list of resources where which are going to be part of this one. Yeah. So as you can see here, these are my various resources. Yeah. So these are all the resources past part of your virtual machines, and the dependent resources for those virtual machines. Now have a look on this location. If you click on sort by location, we will find that I have a virtual machines spread across location. For example, there are some virtual machine 10 which is in Australia, virtual machine 14 is in central India, um 13 is central US, uh, and then 15 is East Asia. So as you can see, I've got the virtual machines spread across the globe. Yeah? Though my resource group was part of um, a different location, I think it was part of East US. Yeah, but I have got resources which are part of which are spread across the globes. Yeah, so that's what I wanted to show you, that even though you have a resource group part of a different location, you can still have a resources part of a different location, right? Now, what you can do is actually, let me go back to resource group. Now, let me show you how we can create a resource group, right? So I've clicked on add, and so this is the page where, okay, you actually configure your subscription. So you can, if you have multiple subscriptions, it will list out all here. And currently I'm on Azure Pass subscription. Yeah. Now, what you need to do is you need to give a resource group name. Let's call this as uh, sales hyphen RG. Yeah. Now, the okay. Sorry, it didn't work out. Sales hyphen RG. Okay. And then what you have to do is you have to give a location. You can select any of the location, irrespective. It doesn't actually matter much. But yeah, I mean, for example, okay, if okay, let's do this. We can create a resource group out here. In this location, North Europe. I click on next. Here is where you're going to configure the tags. Location Europe, yeah, and then click on next, where actually it's going to give a short summary and it does a small validation. Okay, and once we are all green, everything is fine. We can go ahead and click on create. Okay, so I've clicked on create, and within few seconds, I can see my resource is already created. Yeah, sales RG. Yeah, it's in North Europe, right? Currently, if you go, there will not be any resources, but I mean, there will be some resources, but not a virtual machine. Yeah, yeah. So as you can see, there are no resources here, and if you want, you can actually go ahead and click on create resource, um, and that's how you can go ahead and create a resource. Or what you can do is when you create a resource, yeah, you can click out here, and then when you say, for example, Windows Server. And then it says, okay, which resource group you want to do. You want to create this resource. I would say sales-rg. This is the one which we have created now, right? And then I give a virtual machine name v16. Yeah. um, this one is selected because our resource group is from North Europe, but I can go ahead and change it to, say, for example, Australia East, right? And yeah, leave it as it is. Yeah, and then I would keep as it is, and I can give the admin ID, admin, password. Okay, let me allow for port 3389. That would be the RDP ports, and yeah, I'll say yeah, I want to use the existing license, and I click I confirm I have a eligible license. I click on next, disks, networking, and all. I'll take a shortcut out here. So I click on review and create, and it will actually give me, it will perform the validation and let me know if any particular issues exist. So it says validation is still running, by the way. So as you can see, validation is passed. Now I can click on create, and it will start the deployment for that virtual machine. So as you can see, initializing deployment, and as you can see in the notification that deployment process is started. Okay, yeah, and we'll give a few seconds before the deployment will be over. Okay, so as you can see, the deployment is complete, and um, we can go to that resource now. So I'll go back to home. I go to resource group, and then I go to sales-rg. And now here I see all these resources, right? These are all resources for V16. So this one is the hard disk. The another one is network interface. That is the network security group, public IP address, and VNet. Yeah. So I can click out there, and this is the resource V16, and we can actually have a look on the V16. So as you can see, part of sales-rg, status running, location of Australia. Yeah, great. So hence proved, we can have a resource part of a different location. It doesn't actually have to be from the same location where resource groups are. Yeah, great. Now let's move ahead and let's have a look on uh, tags. Yeah.
Okay, so we have now configured our routing groups and we have seen on the portal how the routing groups can be used, right? But how are we going to make sure that the resources are for a particular department, and how we are going to make sure that that particular department is built for the resource that it is utilizing, right? We want to make sure that the department is built as per their utilization, isn't it? Right? So there is a very simple concept in Azure, that is Azure tags. So Azure tags, what it helps is it actually helps in adding some information or some sort of a description, or if you go to a shopping mall, you will find a lot of trousers, right? And you will find some price slips, right? So like that, I mean, in correlation with that, you will have some sort of information about a virtual machine. So that information is actually can be configured. It could be based on your department or based on the environment. So those sort of things we are going to look at, and that will how we. I mean, we are also going to look at how we are going to utilize that information. What are the options we get when we configure that, right? Okay, great. So I'll see you in the session.
Okay, so now let's talk about tags, right? So what are tags used for? Well, Azure tags, you can actually configure the names. It's actually a name value pair for text data that you can apply to resources and resource groups. For example, you can name a department and the value of that could be marketing, sales, IT, HR, etc. You can attach bind up to 50 tags to a resource. And common use cases, cost center, that could be, you can actually tag all these resources with particular cost centers so that you can actually build them accordingly. And you can use to distinguish the resource with respect to department, yeah, or a particular environment, or if you want to automate few things, right? For example, if you want to automate some few things like such as start and stop of or shutdown of a virtual machine, right? So you can utilize all this various options with tags. Yeah, now let's look at few of the let's go to the portal and see the tags. Yeah.
Alright, so now we have seen the theoretical part of the tags. Let's go into the portal and see how we can configure those tags, right? Great, I'll show you that on the portal.
Okay, I'm back to my portal, and you would remember that we had created this resource V16, and that is part of the sales RG, isn't it? And the location was Australia East, right? Now, as you can see, we have not configured tags out here, right? So let's do this. Let's configure some tags here, yeah? So I can do it from here, or I can actually go here and configure the tags, yeah? One and the same thing. So it has a name and value. So let's call this a department, yeah, and value will be sales. We can give another one which is like a environment. Okay, there was a typo here. Let me correct it. And then we can say, QAT, that is for test. So we can go on and add all those values, right? We can go on, and you remember as per the slides, what is the maximum value? Well, it's about 50. So we can go on and add about 50 tags to a resource. Yeah. And that's quite big number. Yeah. And based on this, you would come to know, okay, this is a department, so you can actually go ahead and build to this department. And then you would also come to know, okay, this is the server which will be used for a UAT. So it is not a production one, and you can plan or automate few things. I mean, for example, you want to use the server for UAT, and that's why you don't want to use it after office hours. You can shut down that server so that you can save some cost on it, isn't it? So all these sort of things you can do with the tags. Yeah, great. Let's go back to the slides.
All right, great. So we have seen the information about tags, right? It's very straightforward, isn't it? I mean, but yes, it is quite helpful, isn't it? Okay, great. Now moving on to the next one is on policies. Well, let me ask you one thing. I mean, you will have a large. You're going to manage a large environment for within Azure. You will have so many servers, and it's not going to be only you who are going to manage the system. It's going to be your team members who are going to manage those infrastructure, isn't it? Now, what happens is, like for example, when you are given a task of designing a solution, you're going to make sure that okay, this particular solution would require this sort of size of a virtual machine, right? And you would actually go through each and every pieces of information to make sure that the correct sizing is done, right? Now, what happens is you want to have a test environment, a test server, right? And I mean, looking at the criticality, you might want to give that task to one of your junior resource, right? Now, that task can actually be accomplished by using a B1S size of a machine, right? Now, it could happen that your team member, okay, he would go on the portal and directly, I mean, select some D1S or some other size of the virtual machine. But I mean, because if your task is going to be accomplished with B1S, why you won't want to go and provision a server which is of high capacity? Right? Unnecessary waste of cost, isn't it? You won't be. I mean, you would want to stop all these sort of things. So how you're going to make sure that the resource, when he is going to provision a virtual machine, he will only provision using B1S. Okay, so those sort of things we can configure that using policies, and we're going to look at the policies in the theoretical part of this session. All right, so I'll see you in the session then.
All right, let's talk about policy. Yeah. So, what is the use of policy? I mean, well, let me ask a few things. I mean, is there a way that you want to configure your environment so that you can manage the environment in a way where you don't provide more access to your team, isn't it? So yes, that is a way, and that's how we are going to look at on this one and see how we can do that. Yeah. So Azure Policy. Okay. So Azure Policy is a service you can use to create, assign, and manage policies, right? It actually provides options for the rules to be created that resources must comply with. Okay. Examples. You can create only B1S virtual machines. That is actually a free tier. So you can assign this sort of a policy to one of your team member who will be tasked only to create virtual machines for a UAT environment for C. Yeah. Or create resource only in East US. I mean, you want to make sure that the resources are created only in a particular location. Yeah. Now here's the pictorial overview and how it works. Yeah. So you configure a policy. Okay. Then what you do is you have to set a condition, right? When to enforce that particular policy, and then what will be the action that will happen with that policy. Yeah. So that is something which you have to create. I mean, that's how this particular concept works. Yeah. Okay. So There's one more concept. Azure policy is inherited by all child resources. For example, if you configure the policy out here, that means if you configure the policy on this particular subscription, that means all the resources, everything under subscription will have that policy inherited. Yeah. So when you're going to configure this policy, you have to make sure that you're configuring at the right level, right? Yeah, so in case if you configure out here at the resource group, then it will only follow to this particular resource. Yeah, it will not be followed on these other resources. All right, great. Now there are two types of policies. One is initiative, and the another one is policy. Yeah, policy definitions. So initiative definition simply uh, put it's managing and assigning policy definitions by grouping a set of policies as one single item. Yeah, so it is actually a collection of policies, whereas policy definition is a single policy. Right, this is a small screenshot which I've taken from the Microsoft site. I mean, basically, it actually gives you the difference between the two. Yeah, great.
Okay, so we have seen about the policies, right? The theoretical information about the policies. We have seen some of the use cases. Well, great. That's nice, right? Now let's go to the portal and have a look on the policies. How we can practically configure those policies. Yeah. Okay. I'll see you in the session where we are going to work on those. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, so now I'm on the okay, so now I'm the portal, and let's work on the policy. So for that, what I'll do is I'll actually type in policy, and I get the policy out here. So this is the overview, right? And as you can see, overall resource compliance is 100%. And what we need to do is we need to check on the assignments and see what are the policies that are assignments are done. Okay, as you can see, there's no assignments yet. And if you look at the definitions, here are the definitions. Okay, so here you will find the inbuilt policies. Yeah, so what we can do is first we need to create a policy, right? These are all your inbuilt policies, right? So what we need to do is we need to find sort with the categories, right? So these are the list of categories that are available right now. Okay, um, first what we will do is we'll actually go ahead with the and try to assign a policy based on compute, right? So I'll uncheck on this one and then select compute. Okay. Now, once I do that, I'll find these are the various inbuilt policies that are available. Okay. So let me expand this one a bit more. And as you can see, I mean, these are the various policies that are available, and we can utilize any of them. So let's use this one, allowed virtual machine size SKUs. We can click on that, and then we will find out the definitions or what this is configured for, right? So as you can see, this is the JSON file, and you can see it's with compute, and as you can go through it, it's for the virtual machines. Yeah, so it's all there, right? Now let's click on assign. Yeah, so this is the policy. Now we need to assign it to a resource group, right? So I've clicked on assign. Okay, now we have to define a scope for this, isn't it? So for this one, what I'll do is I'll click on these three dots. We'll have to choose the subscription, and then we'll have to choose the resource group, right? So if I don't choose the resource group, then it will apply to all the resource groups, right? So for our example, we'll apply only for sales RG resource group, right? So I'll click on that and I click on select. Okay, so yeah, so it will actually do this one, and okay, and then I click on next. So here we are going to assign the SKUs. So this will list out the various SKUs that are available with Azure. For us, we want to assign for B1S. So I'll just have a look. Where is B1S? Here it is. So now what we're doing out here is we are saying, okay, I mean, this is the uh, machine or virtual machine SKU that will be allowed. So we are allowing only B1S. If we want to allow more options, then we can check box all these ones, yeah, and then we can click on next. Okay, and here we don't have to worry much about it, and then we can click on next, and then we can click on uh, create. Yeah, so now what we have done is we have assigned the policy. Yeah, we have created and assigned the policy to a routing group, isn't it? Now let's go back to policy. Yeah, now we see we can go back and check on the assignments tab again, and see now we have one assignment. Yeah, and that is for allowed virtual machine size SKU, correct? Now let's go back to home and go back to our resource group. We'll select sales RG, and you remember, right? I mean, we had assigned the policy out here, isn't it? So what we need to do is we need to click on add, and we can click on the virtual machine here, Windows 2016 data center, and then that will be the resource group, right? And for the virtual machine name, let's call it V17, and let's keep the location as it is. This one also as it is, no problem. Now here, we have selected only B1S, right? So in that case, the policy is to allow only B1S. But when we are creating the virtual machine, we have selected B2S, right? Let's see what happens. I add in the password. Okay, allowing only RDP ports. Um, and then I can click on yes, I confirm. I directly go ahead and click on review plus create. Yeah. So let's see what happens with the review. Okay. So as you can see, the validation is passed, right? Now let's go ahead and click on create. Now, if I mean based on the policy, it should actually fail. Saying that the policy restrictions are there. Yes, there we go, right? So deployment validation failed. So it says the deployment validation failed. Yeah. Additional details from the underlying API that might be helpful. The template deployment failed because of policy violation. Please see details for more information. Yeah. So that shows that our policy is working. I mean, that is what was expected, right? The policy was created only to allow for creating B1S machine, isn't it? And but we try to create a B2S SKU machine, right? So let's go ahead and close this out. And now what we'll do is we'll create a resource again uh, with a Windows server, and then we're going to select the same resource group sales RG, and we'll give a name V18. Yeah, we leave it as it is, all those things as it is. And this time what we'll do is we are going to select B1S. Yeah, so what I'll do is I click on select size. Now here I'm going to select B1S. Yeah, and then I click on select. Okay, I'll go ahead and click on preview plus create. So as you can see, validation has succeeded. Now I'll click on create. It will take a few seconds before the virtual machine will be provisioned, and this time it will be success. Yeah. Um, so let me pause this video for now. Deployment, as you can see, deployment is in progress. That means we have, we have configured the virtual machine based on the policy now. That's why we are able to see the deployment in progress. Or else it would have failed and it would have said it's not in the policy. Deployment failed as per policy. All right. So let me pause this video and let me go ahead and let it deploy in the background. Right. Great. Thank you.
Wow, great. So we have now understood about the resource groups, we have understood about tags, we have understood about policies, we have seen all these demos, right? It was so nice to see all these pieces working in Azure, isn't it? One more thing. Yeah? There's one more thing which we need to actually look at before we conclude this session, that is about Azure Logs. Okay, so now, I mean, you okay? So you have your team, right? I mean, taking the earlier example, yeah, you have your team, and you have the team working under you. One of your resource, I mean, you ask the resource, okay, go ahead and after 6 p.m. you can shut down the test server because that work will be not required. Okay, so you can go ahead and shut down that server, okay, or delete that server. Okay, so what happens? I mean, uh, maybe because of the miscommunication, your team member goes ahead and deletes the production server. Well, there is always a way to recover it, but how we can avoid this situation, right? It is quite possible that this sort of situation can happen, human error or whatever things, but how we can avoid it? Azure Logs. Okay, so Azure Logs can help us provide this sort of situation, right? So we're going to look at in this session we're going to look about the Azure Logs. Okay, so I'll see you in the session. Great.
Okay, so let's talk about logs. So Azure Log prevents users in your organization from accidental deleting or modifying critical resources. Yeah, we're going to create logs in the Azure portal and see how it works out. Yeah, there are two options that are available in the logs. One is for delete. That is only to make sure that we don't accidentally delete any service. It has the permission of read and modify a resource, but can't delete it. Now, the second option is more stringent. It is read only. In that, we can read a resource, but we can't modify or delete a resource. So this is how it works. It's similar to Azure policy. When you apply logs to a parent scope, then it gets inherited to the child resources. Yeah. So if you apply on the subscription level, then it actually gets applied out on the resource group as well as on the resources, right? And we are going to see how it works here. So let's go to the portal and have a look at it. Yeah, great.
All right, so we have seen about the theoretical piece of logs, right? But it's not enough, right? We should actually look at practically, right? And that's how we can actually see how the things work in the real environment, right? So let's go to the portal, see how we can configure the logs, like how we have seen about the resource groups, tags, policies. One last bit and we'll see about the working of Azure Logs. All right, great.
Okay, so here is the demonstration about logs. So I'm on virtual machine V16, and this is created under Sales RG, isn't it? Okay, great. So what I'll do is I'll go to create logs for this one. So it's out here. I'll click on logs. Now, as we have seen in the theoretical session, there are only two options for logs. Yeah, one is read only and one is delete, right? So let's see about delete. Yeah, let's select delete and see what happens. So we'll have to give a name here. So we'll put it as do not delete uh, this server. Okay, and this log is in place to avoid accidental deletion of virtual machine. I click on OK. Yeah. So now it's already applied. Yeah. So let me go back to home. Yeah. Over here. Yeah. And let me go ahead and click on delete. So this action will permanently delete the virtual machine, and data will be gone. If you do you want to continue, I would click on yes, and it says fail to delete the virtual machine. The scope says, yeah, and then it says please remove the log and try again. Okay, but what I can do, I mean, before I move to the second option of log, um, what I can show you another thing is like if I go on size, yeah, before I move to the second option, and if I click on this one, right, and if I have to resize to uh, by policy, correct? I mean, this is not allowed by policy, isn't it? So, so what I'll do is, first thing is I will create a lock to this one. Yeah. So, okay, I click on add and then I will click on read only. So that means not allowed to modify any setting. Yeah. This policy is created to uh, disallow any configuration changes, and then I click on OK. Yeah. Now I know that we have actually configured the policy, so let me go ahead and do one thing for just for this demo. I will actually go to the resource group and I will go ahead and delete that particular policy. Yeah. So I'm going to click on policies and then assignments. Okay, so as you can see, it's there, and I click on these three dots, and okay, I can create an exception for V16 here. Okay, or what I'll do is for now, for this particular requirement, what I'll do is, I mean, I'll go ahead and delete the assignment. I click on yes, so assignment is successfully deleted. Now that particular policy will not apply, right? Now let me go back to sales RG, or let me go back uh, to V16, yeah, V16 here, and let me show the log that we had applied. So we have two logs here. One is for do not delete, and we have tested out by deleting the server, and we saw that we were not able to delete. Now we have added another log that is to uh, disable or disallow any modification to the server, right? So if we go to size, yeah, that is, let's try to modify the SKU for this one, right? It's currently um, B2S. Let's click on B1S and let's click on resize. Okay, so this time it says error, the provider following scope are locked. That means now that particular, I mean, if you have to modify this configuration, we'll have to remove the lock and try again. Yeah, that means the policy which we applied, I mean, the one which we configured for lock, that is working, isn't it? I mean, because of this one, we are not able to modify the configuration of the virtual machine. All right, great. Let's go back to our slides. All right, great. So we are end of this lecture, and we have covered quite a bit on this session, right? We started off with Azure Resource Manager. We touched base on Azure Resource Manager templates using which is actually using JSON. We touched base a bit on the resource groups where we discussed it is more like a container. It has no interrelation of resource being tagged to a location. Resource group can be part of one particular location, whereas resources can be part of a different location. Right. Then we actually moved ahead and we discussed about tags, and we saw how tags are useful, and we saw that we can apply about 50 tags to a resource. So that's quite a huge number, and that's good enough for maintaining our resources. Yeah. Where then we moved on, we saw about the policies, and we configured some of the policies by which we were not able to modify or make the changes. Yeah, and then we checked on the logs. We saw how we created the logs. We have two different logs. One was for avoid accidental deletion of a resource, and then another log was for making any configuration changes to the resource. So we saw all these practical demos on the portal, right? On the Azure portal, right? Great. In case if you have any further information that you're looking for, you can go through these two links and follow the information out there, right? Great. So before I wind up this session, I would like to thank you all for viewing this session. And if you're liking this session, please do give me a thumbs up, and please do feel free to share this video to your friends and colleagues, right? Great. Keep watching and keep learning. Thank you.
Alright, guys, it was quite a bit to cover, and it was such a nice session about the various Azure resource management things that we can configure. We started off with understanding the template. We started, after that, we moved on to the Azure resource groups, and we found out what are the use cases for the resource groups. We came to know, resource groups can actually be part of a particular location. It's just for the metadata, but actually it can have resources from other locations also, right? So that's quite cool, isn't it? Then we moved on to see what are the tags, what are the uses of the tags, and then we actually went ahead and saw about the policies, and we saw about some use cases for the policies. We went through and configured the policies also, right? You remember that, right? Then we actually saw about Azure logs, right? And we actually saw how we can configure those logs. Basically, there are two configurations in logs, but yeah, it makes quite sense to have those logs configured in the environment, right? So that's all, guys, for this session, and I hope you guys enjoyed this session. And it was quite an interesting session, isn't it, right? So if you guys have enjoyed this session, please give me a thumbs up and do subscribe to the channel. Please do feel free to share with your friends and colleagues, because they should also gain the knowledge which you have gained, right? Great. So until next time, keep watching and keep learning. Thank you.